I was locked in my own bedroom, the muffled bass of a 50-person rave pounding through the walls, while my son stood outside smirking, saying, "No drama tonight, Mom." I never imagined my own house would become a prison of noise and betrayal. The life I had built with these hands, in this Brooklyn brownstone, had turned against me like a wounded animal. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Estelle Richardson, and I'm 73 years old. Every morning for the past 5 years, I've awakened to the sound of my own loneliness echoing through rooms that once held laughter. The smell of stale coffee clings to the air in my Brooklyn home like a ghost refusing to leave. My arthritic fingers wrap around the same chipped mug I've used for 20 years, the one Marcus gave me for Mother's Day when he was 12. Back then, his eyes sparkled when he handed it to me, wrapped in newspaper because we couldn't afford fancy gift wrap. That little boy is gone now, replaced by a 35-year-old man who sees me as nothing more than an ATM with graying hair and failing eyesight. The morning light filters through my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the cracked linoleum floor. I can hear the pigeons cooing on my fire escape, the same fire escape where Marcus used to sit when he was angry, dangling his legs like he was ready to fly away from all of us. Now I wonder if he wished he had. My hands shake as I reach for my phone. 3 missed calls from Mara, my daughter in Los Angeles. She only calls when Marcus has done something terrible, when she needs me to be the mediator, the peacekeeper, the one who smooths over his latest disaster with my forgiveness and my wallet. The screen shows 17 unread text messages. My heart sinks before I even open them. Mom, Marcus threw a party last night. Big one. Neighbors are complaining. You need to talk to him. I set the phone down and stare at the wall where our family portraits used to hang. I took them down last month after finding drug paraphernalia in Marcus's room. The nail holes remain like tiny wounds in the faded wallpaper, reminders of happiness that once lived here. You see, I never expected my golden years to taste like this. Bitter, cold, forgotten. The brownstone creaks around me. 3 stories of memories and mortgage payments I'm still making at 73 because I refinanced twice to pay for Marcus's college education, then his failed business ventures, then his legal troubles. The house remembers better times. Sunday dinners with the whole family crowded around my grandmother's oak table. Mara practicing piano in the living room while Marcus built Lego castles on the Persian rug my mother left me. The Christmas mornings when we were poor in money but rich in love. But memories don't pay the electric bill. Love doesn't fix a broken heating system or replace a leaking roof. And my children, the 2 people I sacrificed everything for, seem to have forgotten that I'm not just their mother anymore. I'm a woman, a human being with needs and feelings and limits that have been stretched so thin, I sometimes wonder if I'll simply snap. Last Tuesday, I found a voicemail on my phone that made my blood run cold. Marcus's voice, slurred from drinking, talking to someone in the background about throwing a massive party at the house. "The old lady won't mind," he said, and I could hear laughter in the background. The old lady. That's what I've become to my own son. Not Mom. Not Estelle. The old lady who pays the bills and keeps her mouth shut. I saved that voicemail. I've listened to it 14 times, each time hoping I misheard something, that maybe he was talking about someone else's mother. But the address he gave was mine. The description of the perfect party house matched every detail of the home I've lived in for 42 years. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could, but it was nothing compared to what came next. That Friday evening, I was in my bedroom, reading a romance novel I'd borrowed from the library. The house was unusually quiet, and I was grateful for the peace. I had no idea that downstairs, Marcus was setting up speakers, moving furniture, and preparing to turn my sanctuary into his personal playground. The first sign something was wrong came at 8 o'clock. Car doors slamming outside, young voices laughing and shouting, footsteps on my front porch, dozens of them. I put down my book and listened, my heart starting to race. Then came the music. Bass so loud it made my bedroom windows rattle. I threw on my robe and rushed toward my bedroom door. That's when I heard it, the click of a lock turning. I grabbed the doorknob and twisted, but it wouldn't budge. Someone had locked me in my own bedroom. "Marcus!" I called out, pounding on the door. "Marcus, what's going on?" His voice came from the other side, casual and cold as ice water. "No drama tonight, Mom. Just stay in there and mind your own business." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own son had locked me in my bedroom like I was a prisoner in my own home. The music got louder. I could hear glass breaking downstairs, people laughing, someone shouting about finding more beer in the fridge. My fridge, my beer, my house. I sank onto my bed and tried to process what was happening. 50 strangers were tearing through my home while I sat trapped in a room that suddenly felt smaller than a coffin. The girl who used to braid my hair when she was nervous, the boy who crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, had reduced me to an inconvenience to be locked away and forgotten. The party raged until 4 in the morning. I know because I watched the clock on my nightstand, counting each minute of humiliation. When the music finally stopped and the last car door slammed outside, I heard Marcus unlock my door. By then, I was too exhausted to cry, too hurt to be angry. I was just empty. But let me tell you how we got here. Because this didn't happen overnight. This was 35 years in the making. I was 19 when I had Marcus, 21 when Mara came along. Their father, Robert, was a good man with a gambling problem that grew worse with each passing year. By the time Marcus was 10, Robert had gambled away our savings, our car, and nearly our house. I took a job at a garment factory in Manhattan, working 12-hour shifts to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. Robert left when Marcus was 15. Just walked out one Tuesday morning while I was at work and the kids were at school. Left a note saying he couldn't handle the pressure anymore. As if I could. As if I had a choice. So there I was. A single mother of 2 teenagers, working dawn to dusk in a factory where the supervisors spoke to us like we were livestock. My hands bled from the sewing machines. My back ached from hunching over fabric for hours. But every paycheck went to my children. School clothes, school supplies, field trips, birthday parties, Christmas presents. I gave them everything I could and told myself it was enough. I told myself they'd understand someday. Marcus was angry about his father leaving. I get that now. But back then, all I saw was a 15-year-old boy who blamed me for everything wrong in his life. He started getting in trouble at school, staying out late, bringing home friends who looked at me like I was something to be tolerated. When I tried to set boundaries, he'd throw his father's abandonment in my face. "At least Dad was honest," he'd say. "He left because he couldn't stand living with you." Those words cut deep, but I swallowed them like bitter medicine. I told myself he was hurting. I told myself he would grow out of it. I kept working, kept sacrificing, kept believing that love would be enough to heal the wounds his father had left behind. Mara was different. Quieter. She kept her head down, got good grades, never caused trouble, but she was watching everything, absorbing the way Marcus treated me, learning that it was acceptable to see Mom as the family servant. She never said cruel things like he did, but she never defended me either. She just watched. When Marcus turned 18, I thought things would get better. He'd graduate high school, maybe go to college, start building his own life. Instead, he announced he was going to study business at a private college in Manhattan. The tuition was $30,000 a year. We didn't have $30,000. We barely had $3,000. "I'll take out loans," I told him. "We'll figure it out." And we did figure it out. I refinanced the house, took out a second mortgage, and worked overtime every week for 4 years to pay for his education. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so he could have spending money. I wore the same 3 dresses to work for 2 years so he could buy textbooks and join a fraternity. He graduated with a business degree and big dreams about starting his own company. I was so proud. Finally, I thought, finally he'll see what I've done for him. Finally, he'll appreciate the sacrifices. His first business was importing artwork from overseas. It failed within 6 months. He lost $12,000 of investor money and came home asking me to help him pay it back. I took out a personal loan against the house. The second business was a food truck that never got off the ground because he couldn't get the proper permits. Another $8,000 gone. The third was a tech startup that existed only in his imagination and my bank account. Each failure made him angrier, more bitter, more convinced that the world owed him something, and somehow, that translated to me owing him something. Every month, there was a new emergency. Rent money, car repairs, credit card payments, legal fees when he got arrested for driving under the influence. "It's just temporary, Mom," he'd say. "Once I get back on my feet, I'll pay you back with interest." I promise. I believed him every time, because that's what mothers do. We believe our children even when they've given us no reason to. We hope against hope that this time will be different. Mara finished college and got a job in Los Angeles. She called every few weeks, usually to tell me about Marcus's latest disaster and ask what I was going to do about it. Never offering to help, never suggesting that maybe Marcus should face some consequences. Just expecting me to fix everything like I always had. The years blurred together. Marcus in and out of jobs, in and out of relationships, in and out of trouble. Always coming home to Mom when things went wrong. Always expecting me to have solutions and money and endless forgiveness. I was getting older, my back was getting worse, and the factory job was becoming harder to manage. But I couldn't retire. I had too many loans against the house, too many monthly payments to Marcus's creditors. My 60th birthday came and went without acknowledgement. Marcus was in the middle of another crisis, something about unpaid taxes, and Mara was busy with her new job. I spent the day alone, looking at bank statements and wondering when I'd become so invisible to the people I loved most. That's when the small cruelties started. Not big dramatic fights, but little cuts that bled just as much. Marcus borrowing my car and returning it with an empty gas tank. Eating the groceries I'd bought for the week and leaving me with empty shelves. Bringing friends over at all hours without asking, treating my home like his personal clubhouse. When I complained, he'd roll his eyes and say, "Don't be so dramatic, Mom. It's not that big a deal." But it was a big deal to me. Every small disrespect felt like another piece of my dignity being chipped away. I started to feel like a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around my own son's moods and schedules. The worst part was how normal it had become. Mara would call and ask how things were, and I'd find myself making excuses for Marcus's behavior. "He's just going through a rough patch," I'd say. "Things will get better." Because admitting the truth felt like admitting I'd failed as a mother. Admitting that 35 years of love and sacrifice had produced a man who saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource to be exploited. But the truth has a way of demanding attention, doesn't it? It builds up like water behind a dam until something has to give. The breaking point came on a cold February morning. I'd been battling a nasty case of the flu for 3 days, barely able to get out of bed. My fever was high, my chest hurt with every breath, and I hadn't eaten a real meal in 48 hours. I texted Marcus, who was downstairs watching television, asking if he could bring me some soup and maybe pick up my prescription from the pharmacy. He never responded. I could hear him laughing at something on TV, could smell the Chinese takeout he'd ordered for himself, but he couldn't be bothered to climb one flight of stairs to check on his sick mother. When I finally dragged myself downstairs that evening, shaking with fever and exhaustion, he looked up from his phone and said, "Oh hey, you look terrible. There's some leftover lo mein in the fridge if you want it." No concern, no apology, no acknowledgement that I'd been asking for help. Just casual indifference to my suffering. That night, I lay in my bed listening to him talking on the phone in the next room. He was telling someone about a party he wanted to throw, how he'd found the perfect place for it. My blood ran cold as I realized he was talking about my house. Our house. The house I'd nearly lost 3 times paying for his mistakes. I got up and pressed my ear to the wall between our rooms. What I heard next changed everything. "Nah, she won't be a problem," Marcus was saying. "The old lady pretty much does whatever I tell her to. I'll just lock her upstairs or something. She won't even know what's happening." The old lady. Lock her upstairs. Won't even know what's happening. I stumbled back to my bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was something darker. This was a son who had stopped seeing his mother as a human being entirely. But even then, part of me wanted to believe I'd misunderstood. Part of me wanted to march into his room and confront him, to give him a chance to explain, to apologize, to show me that somewhere inside the man who had disappointed me so many times, my little boy still existed. Instead, I did what I'd been doing for years. I stayed quiet. I swallowed my hurt. I told myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe the fever was making me paranoid. 3 weeks later, I found out exactly how wrong I was. The party was everything I'd feared and worse. By the time Marcus unlocked my bedroom door at 4 in the morning, my house looked like a war zone. Red wine stains on my grandmother's Persian rug, cigarette burns on my coffee table. Someone had vomited in my kitchen sink and left it there. My picture frames were knocked over. My books were scattered across the floor, and there were beer bottles and plastic cups in every room. I walked through the damage in my bathrobe, stepping over broken glass and sticky puddles, while Marcus followed behind me making excuses. "It's not that bad, Mom. I'll clean it up tomorrow. These things happen at parties." But I wasn't listening anymore. I was looking at the ruins of my sanctuary, the home I'd protected and preserved for 42 years, reduced to a fraternity house aftermath. The disrespect was so complete, so total, that something inside me finally snapped. I turned around and looked at my son, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. He was standing there in yesterday's clothes, hungover and defensive, waiting for me to start cleaning up his mess like I always did, waiting for me to swallow this latest humiliation and pretend everything was fine. "Get out," I said quietly. He laughed. "What?" "Get out of my house. Now." The laughter died on his lips. "Mom, come on. Don't be ridiculous. I live here." "Not anymore. Get your things and get out." I'd never seen him look so genuinely surprised. For 35 years, I'd been predictable, forgiving, weak, the pushover mother who always bent rather than breaking. But looking around at what he'd done to my home, to my sanctuary, I realized that bending had only made me easier to break. "You can't kick me out," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "This is my home, too. This is my home," I said. "My name is on the deed. My money pays the mortgage, and I'm done sharing it with someone who treats me like garbage." The argument that followed was ugly. Marcus tried everything: anger, manipulation, threats, even fake tears. He called me selfish, ungrateful, cruel. He said I was ruining his life, that he had nowhere else to go, that I was destroying our family. But for the first time in years, I didn't cave. I didn't apologize. I didn't try to fix his feelings or solve his problems. I just repeated the same words over and over. "Get out of my house." When Mara called that afternoon, frantic because Marcus had shown up on her doorstep in Los Angeles with 2 suitcases and a sob story, I thought she might support me for once. I thought she might say that Marcus had crossed a line, that he'd brought this on himself. Instead, she said, "Mom, how could you kick out your own son? He's family. Family doesn't give up on each other." The irony was suffocating. Family doesn't give up on each other. But apparently it was fine for family to lock each other in bedrooms and destroy each other's homes. It was fine for family to take and take and take without ever giving back. But the moment I stood up for myself, I was the one breaking up the family. "Where's he supposed to go?" Mara asked. "That's not my problem anymore," I said, and hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in 35 years, my house was truly mine. No one asking for money. No one making demands. No one treating me like hired help in my own home. It should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt terrifying. What if I'd made a mistake? What if this made me the villain in my own family's story? What if I'd damaged something that could never be repaired? For 3 days, I second-guessed myself. I cleaned Marcus's destroyed party aftermath by myself, scrubbing wine stains and picking up broken glass while wondering if I'd been too harsh. Maybe I should call him. Maybe I should apologize. Maybe I should find a way to fix this like I'd fixed everything else. Then I found the notebook. It was wedged between Marcus's mattress and box spring, probably forgotten in his rush to pack. A spiral-bound notebook filled with his handwriting. At first I thought it might be a diary, something private I shouldn't read, but the first page I opened changed my mind. It was a list. A detailed list of my assets, my bank accounts, my monthly income. Below that, a timeline of my likely death based on my age and health, and calculations of what he stood to inherit. At the bottom, in his neat handwriting, were the words, "Need to keep her happy until at least 80. After that, nursing home." I flipped through more pages. Plans for renovating his house once I was gone. Lists of my jewelry and furniture and their estimated value. Notes about my friend Maria's house, too, suggesting he'd been casing other elderly women in the neighborhood. One page was titled, "Managing Mom," with bullet points underneath. Keep her isolated from friends who might give her ideas. Regular guilt trips about Dad leaving. Remind her that family is all she has. Never let her think she deserves better. I sat on his bed holding that notebook, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. This wasn't just disrespect or thoughtlessness. This was calculated manipulation. This was a 35-year-old man who had systematically isolated and exploited his own mother while planning for her death. The little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms had grown into a predator who saw me as nothing more than a renewable resource, and I had enabled every step of his transformation. But here's what hurt most. I wasn't even that surprised. Some part of me had known for years that something was deeply wrong with the way Marcus treated me. I'd just chosen to ignore it, to make excuses, to tell myself that love would eventually break through his selfishness. Reading that notebook, I finally understood that love had never been part of the equation for him. I was a mark, a target, a vulnerable old woman who could be manipulated and controlled until she was no longer useful. I burned the notebook in my fireplace that night, watching 35 years of illusions turn to ash. And with them, I burned the last of my willingness to be anyone's victim. The transformation didn't happen overnight. 35 years of conditioning yourself to be small and accommodating doesn't disappear with a single moment of clarity. But reading that notebook had shifted something fundamental inside me. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. I couldn't unknow what I now knew. The first real test came 2 weeks later when Marcus called. Not to apologize, not to ask how I was doing, but to inform me that he needed money for a security deposit on an apartment in Los Angeles. $3,000. "Just a loan," he said, like he'd said 100 times before. My old self would have found a way, would have taken money from my grocery budget or borrowed against the house again, would have convinced herself that helping him get settled was the right thing to do. Instead, I said, "No." The word felt foreign in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd never learned. But it also felt powerful. "What do you mean, no?" Marcus asked. "I mean no. I'm not giving you money." The silence stretched between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. Finally, he tried a different approach. "Mom, I know you're mad about the party, but that's not fair. I said I was sorry. You can't punish me forever." "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm just not giving you money. But I need it. Mara's couch isn't a permanent solution. I need my own place." "Then get a job and earn it." Another silence. Then, "You're being really cruel, Mom. Dad was right about you." There it was. The nuclear option. The weapon he'd been using against me for 20 years. Throwing his father's abandonment in my face whenever I didn't give him what he wanted. But this time, instead of cutting me, those words bounced off like stones against bulletproof glass. "Your father was a gambling addict who ran away from his responsibilities," I said calmly. "If you want to follow in his footsteps, that's your choice. But you'll do it without my money." I hung up before he could respond. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cooked dinner for one. A real dinner, with vegetables and seasoning and care. I set my grandmother's china on the table, lit a candle, and ate in peace while watching the sun set through my kitchen window. It was the most delicious meal I'd had in decades. But peace, I was learning, was something you had to fight for every day. Marcus didn't give up easily. Neither did Mara. Over the next few weeks, I received a barrage of calls, texts, and emails. Marcus tried anger, self-pity, manipulation, and threats. Mara tried reasoning, guilt, and emotional blackmail. "He's sleeping on my couch, Mom," she said during one particularly difficult call. "This affects me too. You're being selfish." "Then tell him to get his own place," I said. "With what money? You cut off his allowance. He's 35 years old, Mara. He shouldn't need an allowance. But he doesn't have any job skills. You kept him dependent on you, and now you're abandoning him." That one stung because there was some truth to it. I had enabled Marcus's dependence. I had made it easy for him to avoid growing up. But I'd done it out of love, not malice. I'd done it because I wanted to protect him from the harsh world that had shown me so little mercy. I didn't abandon him, I said. I stopped enabling him. There's a difference. But doubt crept in during the long nights when the house felt too quiet and my phone stayed silent. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe cutting him off completely was cruel. Maybe there was a middle ground where I could help him without sacrificing my own dignity. These doubts were tested severely when Marcus showed up at my door 3 weeks later. He looked terrible. Thin, unshaven, wearing the same clothes he'd had on when I kicked him out. Behind him stood a young woman I'd never seen before, pretty but tired-looking, holding the hand of a little boy who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. "Mom," Marcus said, "I'd like you to meet Sarah and Tyler. My girlfriend and her son." My heart clenched. A child. Marcus had brought a child into this. "Tyler, say hi to Grandma Estelle," Marcus prompted. The little boy looked up at me with enormous brown eyes and whispered, "Hi." I wanted to scoop him up and bring him inside and feed him cookies. I wanted to tell Sarah she was welcome, that there was always room in my home for people who needed shelter. I wanted to be the grandmother and mother and woman I'd always tried to be. But I also saw what Marcus was doing. He'd brought them here knowing I couldn't resist a child in need. This was manipulation at its most sophisticated. "Hello, Tyler," I said gently. "Hello, Sarah." Sarah looked embarrassed and uncomfortable. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Richardson. Marcus said you wouldn't mind if we stayed for a few days while we look for a place." "Actually," I said, looking directly at Marcus, "I do mind." His face went through several expressions: surprise, anger, calculation. "Mom, there's a kid involved here. You can't just—" "You're right," I interrupted. "There is a child involved, which is why you need to find appropriate housing for him instead of dragging him around to guilt-trip your mother." I turned to Sarah. "Honey, there are family shelters in Brooklyn that can help you and Tyler. Places with resources and support systems. My son is not your solution, and neither am I." And I went inside and came back with a piece of paper where I'd written addresses and phone numbers for 3 family service organizations. "These people can actually help you," I said, handing it to Sarah. "They won't just use you to manipulate someone else." Sarah took the paper, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus was furious. "You're unbelievable. You're going to let a 5-year-old be homeless because you're mad at me?" "I'm not making anyone homeless," I said. "You are. You're the one who chose to involve innocent people in your schemes instead of taking responsibility for your own life." I went back inside and locked the door, my heart breaking for Tyler, but knowing I'd done the right thing. Through the window, I watched Marcus argue with Sarah on my front steps. She was crying, shaking her head, pointing at the paper I'd given her. Finally, she picked up Tyler and walked away. Marcus followed, still arguing. 2 days later, I got a call from Mara. "Sarah called me," she said without preamble. "She wanted to thank you for the information about family services. They got into a program that's helping her get back on her feet." "Good," I said. She also told me what Marcus has been doing, the lies he's been telling her about his family situation. "About you." I waited. "Mom, I owe you an apology. I thought you were being cruel, but I didn't know. I didn't understand how bad things had gotten. It was the first time in years that one of my children had acknowledged my perspective without trying to change it. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like a funeral." "Where is Marcus now?" I asked. "I don't know. Sarah said he disappeared after she got into the program. She thinks he was only interested in her housing voucher." "Of course he was. My son, the man I'd sacrificed 35 years of my life to raise, was now effectively homeless because he couldn't find another vulnerable person to exploit. The tragedy wasn't that he was struggling. The tragedy was that he'd become the kind of person who deserved to struggle. But my story doesn't end with Marcus's downfall. It doesn't end with me alone in my house, bitter and victorious. Because recovery from decades of abuse, even abuse from people you love, is about more than just stopping the abuse. It's about rebuilding yourself from the ground up. 6 months after I changed my locks and my phone number, I did something I hadn't done in 40 years. I signed up for an art class at the community center. Watercolor painting. I'd always wanted to try it, but there had never been time, never been money, never been space in my life for something so purely selfish. The instructor was a woman named Joan, about my age, with silver hair and paint-stained fingers. On the first day, she asked us to paint something that made us happy. I stared at the blank paper for 30 minutes, paralyzed. When was the last time I'd thought about what made me happy? When was the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to? Finally, I painted my kitchen window at sunrise. Golden light streaming through sheer curtains, a cup of coffee steaming on the sill. It wasn't good. The proportions were wrong, the colors muddy. But looking at it, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pride in creating something instead of just surviving something. Joan came over to look at my painting. "Beautiful light," she said. "You can tell this is a place you love." "It's my kitchen," I said. "I watch the sunrise there every morning." "Then you're already an artist," she said. "You just needed to learn how to show other people what you see." I cried right there in that community center classroom, surrounded by easels and paintbrushes and women my own age who were also learning that it wasn't too late to become who they were meant to be. Art class led to other things. Coffee with Joan after class. A book club at the library. Volunteer work at a senior center where I met other women with stories like mine. Women who'd spent decades pouring themselves out for ungrateful families. Women who were learning to discover who they were underneath all that giving. One of these women was Maria Santos, whose story made my own troubles seem small. Her 3 adult children had convinced her to sign over her house to them for tax purposes, then promptly sold it and moved her into a studio apartment while keeping the profits. When she tried to protest, they cut off all contact and turned her grandchildren against her. "I used to think family meant never giving up on people," Maria told me one afternoon as we painted side by side. "Now I think family means never giving up on yourself." Through stories like Maria's, I began to understand that my experience with Marcus wasn't unique. There's an epidemic of adult children who see their aging parents as resources to be managed rather than people to be loved. Society calls it elder abuse, but that clinical term doesn't capture the emotional devastation of being systematically devalued by the people you raised. I also learned that my decision to cut Marcus off wasn't cruel or unusual. It was necessary self-preservation. A woman named Dr. Patricia Williams, who ran support groups for exploited parents, explained it to me this way. When you enable someone's dysfunction, you become part of their disease. The kindest thing you can do for an adult child who's treating you badly is to stop making it comfortable for them to do so. It wasn't easy wisdom to accept. Everything in my conditioning as a mother screamed against it. But after months of sleeping peacefully in my own bed, of eating meals without criticism, of making decisions without having to justify them to anyone, I began to understand that there was a difference between loving someone and letting them destroy you. The real test of my transformation came 9 months after I'd changed my locks. I was in my garden, planting tomatoes in the small patch behind my brownstone, when I heard someone calling my name. I looked up to see Marcus standing at my back gate. He looked different, cleaner. His hair was cut, his clothes were new, and there was something in his posture that seemed less arrogant, more tentative. For a moment, I felt the old familiar tug of maternal hope. Maybe he'd learned something. Maybe he'd changed. "Hi, Mom," he said through the chain-link fence. "Marcus?" I kept planting, my hands steady in the soil. "I've been in therapy," he said. 3 months now, learning about things, about how I've treated you." I didn't respond. I'd learned not to react to everything he said, not to fill every silence with forgiveness and reassurance. "I know you probably don't believe me," he continued. "I know I've said I'd change before, but this is different. I got a job. A real job, with benefits. I'm renting a room from this older guy who's teaching me about responsibility. Part of me wanted to ask about the job, to show interest and support, but a larger part of me remembered the notebook, remembered the party, remembered 35 years of promises that evaporated the moment they became inconvenient. "I'm glad to hear you're doing well," I said neutrally. "Mom, I want to apologize. Really apologize. Not just say words so you'll help me out. I want to acknowledge what I did to you." I looked up at him then, studied his face. There did seem to be something different there. Less entitlement, more uncertainty. The therapy might actually be working. Okay, I said. I'm listening. He took a deep breath. I treated you like garbage for years. I took your money. I disrespected your home. I manipulated you emotionally. I brought strangers into your house and locked you in a room like you were nothing. And the worst part is, I told myself it was okay, because you were my mother, because you owed me something. The words were right. They addressed specific behaviors rather than making vague promises. They acknowledged impact rather than just intent. I could hear Dr. Williams' voice in my head. Real apologies are about their actions, not your feelings. I used you, Marcus continued. I saw you as a resource instead of a person. And when you finally stood up for yourself, I punished you for it. I brought Sarah and Tyler to make you feel guilty, knowing you couldn't resist helping a child. That was manipulative and cruel. I set down my trowel and really looked at him. This was the most self-awareness he'd shown in his entire adult life. The therapist helped me understand that I've been angry at you for Dad leaving, like it was your fault he chose gambling over his family. I blamed you for not being enough to make him stay, and I punished you for not being enough to fix me either. Tears were streaming down his face now, and I felt my own eyes burning. The little boy I'd loved so fiercely was finally, maybe, growing into a man who could take responsibility for his choices. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I don't expect you to let me back into your life. I just wanted you to know that I see what I did. I'm sorry for what I did. And I'm trying to become someone who deserves better from the people who love them. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting after an hour of gardening. Marcus, I said, I need you to understand something. I love you. I will always love you. But love doesn't mean I have to accept being treated badly. Love doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my dignity to make you comfortable. He nodded. I know. I finally know. If you're really changing, I'm proud of you. But you're not changing for me. You can't be changing for me. You have to be doing it for yourself because it's the right thing to do. I am, he said. I mean, I think I am. Some days are harder than others, but I'm trying. We stood there looking at each other through the chain-link fence, mother and son, two people who'd hurt each other deeply and were trying to figure out if there was a way forward. What do you need from me? I asked. Nothing, he said. And I could tell the word was as foreign to him as no had been to me. I just wanted you to know I'm working on myself, and maybe someday, if you feel ready, we could have coffee. Just coffee. No agenda, no asks, just talking. I considered this. Coffee in a public place. A finite interaction with a clear beginning and end. No money changing hands, no opening my home to chaos. Just two adults attempting conversation. Maybe, I said, when I'm ready. He smiled then, and for just a moment I saw the child he'd been before life, and choices and disappointment had twisted him into someone I couldn't recognize. Thank you for not giving up on me completely, he said. I didn't give up on you, I said. I gave up on letting you destroy me. There's a difference. After he left, I sat in my garden for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and boundaries, about love and self-preservation. The conversation had gone better than I'd expected, but I wasn't ready to trust it yet. Too many years of disappointment had taught me to be cautious with hope. 3 months later, Marcus sent me a card for my birthday. Not asking for anything, not making promises, just acknowledging the day and telling me he hoped I was well. It was the first birthday card I'd received from him in over a decade. I didn't respond immediately. I kept the card on my kitchen table for 2 weeks, looking at it every morning with my coffee, testing my feelings. Did I want to respond? Was I ready to take that first small step toward rebuilding something new from the ashes of what we'd lost? Finally, I sent him a text. Thank you for the card. I'd be willing to meet for coffee next week. We met at a small cafe in Park Slope, neutral territory where we could both feel safe to leave if things went badly. He arrived first, already seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He'd remembered how I liked mine, black with a touch of cream. You look good, Mom, he said when I sat down. Relaxed. I did look good, I realized. 8 months of sleeping peacefully, of eating when I wanted what I wanted, of spending my time and energy on myself had made a visible difference. My posture was straighter, my eyes clearer, my smile more genuine. "I feel good," I said. We talked for an hour. Not about the past, not about his therapy or my boundaries, just about ordinary things. Books we were reading, movies we'd seen, the changes in the neighborhood. It was the kind of conversation I'd imagined having with my adult son for years, before everything became about his crises and my solutions. When we parted, he hugged me briefly and said, "Same time next month?" "We'll see," I said. But I was already planning what I might wear. That coffee date led to another, then to a careful, limited relationship built on new terms. Marcus got to see his mother again, but only as long as he treated her with respect. I got to have a relationship with my son, but only within boundaries that protected my peace and dignity. It wasn't the relationship I'd dreamed of when I first held him as a baby. It wasn't the close, warm connection I'd sacrificed so much to try to create. But it was real in a way our old dynamic had never been. It was based on mutual respect rather than obligation, on genuine care rather than manipulation. More importantly, it was optional for both of us. He chose to be there, and so did I. Neither of us was trapped by guilt or duty or fear. We were two adults who shared a complicated history, trying to build something healthier from what was left. As for Mara, she surprised me. Once she understood what had really been happening between Marcus and me, she became my staunchest defender. She flew out from Los Angeles for my 74th birthday and spent the week helping me reorganize the house, pulling down old family photos and replacing them with pictures from my art class and volunteer work. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said, as we hung a watercolor I'd painted of the Brooklyn Bridge. "It took courage to do what you did." "It took desperation," I said. I finally ran out of ways to make excuses. "No," she said firmly. "It took courage. I know because I've been making excuses for Marcus my whole life, too. Watching you stop was what helped me realize I could stop, too." Mara's support meant more to me than I can express. For so many years, I'd felt like I was fighting alone, like I was the only one who saw how destructive the family dynamic had become. Having my daughter acknowledge the truth and stand with me was like being handed a life preserver after years of drowning. But the most profound change wasn't in my relationships with my children. It was in my relationship with myself. For the first time in my adult life, I was living for me. Not as someone's mother or caretaker or financial support system, but as Estelle Richardson, a woman with her own interests and desires and dreams. I painted watercolors that no one else would ever see, just because I enjoyed the feel of the brush in my hand. I read romance novels without guilt, traveled to art museums in Manhattan on weekends, joined a hiking group for seniors. I bought clothes I liked instead of clothes that were practical. I cooked elaborate meals for myself and ate them by candlelight while listening to jazz. Some people might think it sounds lonely, but it wasn't. It was peaceful. It was mine. The house that had once felt like a prison became a sanctuary again. I could walk from room to room without encountering anyone else's drama or mess or demands. I could leave my books where I wanted them, display my artwork where I could see it, keep the thermostat at the temperature I preferred. Small freedoms, maybe. But when you've spent decades accommodating everyone else's needs, small freedoms feel revolutionary. I also discovered that when you stop being available for everyone else's crises, you have time and energy for genuine friendships. Women from my art class became real friends, people I could confide in and rely on. Joan, my instructor, and I took weekend trips to art festivals and galleries. Maria and I went to Broadway shows and tried new restaurants. These friendships were different from family relationships because they were truly voluntary. No one was there out of obligation or guilt. We chose each other, appreciated each other, supported each other because we wanted to, not because we had to. One evening, as I was sitting in my garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, I thought about the old me, the woman who used to lie awake at night worrying about everyone else's problems, who used to eat peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so her son could have spending money, who used to accept being locked in her own bedroom because confrontation felt scarier than submission. I felt sorry for her, that old version of myself. She'd been so afraid of being alone that she'd accepted being lonely. so afraid of conflict that she'd chosen a life of constant crisis, so focused on being needed that she'd forgotten to insist on being valued. But I also felt grateful to her. Without her years of sacrifice and suffering, I wouldn't have understood how precious freedom could be. Without hitting that rock bottom of humiliation and betrayal, I wouldn't have found the strength to climb back up. The woman I am now exists because the woman I was finally said, enough. She exists because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling someone else's dysfunction. She exists because dignity isn't selfish. It's necessary. I think about this a lot when I'm painting or gardening or simply sitting quietly in my clean, peaceful home. How many women my age are still trapped in the cycle I escaped? How many are still sacrificing their dignity on the altar of family loyalty? How many are still telling themselves that love means accepting unacceptable treatment? If you're one of those women, I want you to know something. You're not responsible for fixing adults who don't want to be fixed. You're not obligated to fund someone else's poor choices. You're not required to accept abuse just because it comes from people you love. Love doesn't demand that you set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Real love, healthy love, includes respect, gratitude, and reciprocity. If someone claims to love you but treats you like garbage, they don't know what love means. And it's not your job to teach them. I'm 74 years old now, and for the first time in my adult life, I wake up each morning looking forward to the day ahead. Not because someone needs me, not because I have problems to solve or crises to manage, but because my life belongs to me now. There's an art exhibit opening next weekend at a gallery in Soho that Joan and I plan to attend. I have a watercolor class on Tuesday, where I'm learning to paint portraits. My neighbor Maria and I are planning a trip to New England to see the fall foliage. These plans exist purely for my enjoyment, and no one can take them away from me because no one is more important to me than my own well-being. That might sound selfish to some people. For most of my life, it would have sounded selfish to me. But I've learned the difference between selfishness and self-care. Selfishness is taking what you haven't earned at someone else's expense. Self-care is protecting what you've earned from people who want to take it without giving anything back. Marcus and I still meet for coffee once a month. The relationship remains limited but genuine. He tells me about his job, his therapy, his small victories in learning to be a responsible adult. I tell him about my art, my friends, my travels. We don't discuss money or the past or what he needs from me. We just talk, like two people who happen to care about each other. Sometimes I catch glimpses of the son I always hoped he'd become, and I feel a quiet satisfaction. Not because I fixed him, he's fixing himself, but because I finally stepped out of the way long enough to let him try. The relationship with Mara has deepened into something I'd never experienced before: friendship with my own daughter. She calls regularly now, not to ask me to solve someone else's problems, but to share her own life and ask about mine. When she visits, we cook together and laugh together and talk about everything and nothing. She's become the kind of daughter I always hoped to have, maybe partly because I became the kind of mother she could respect. Looking back, I realize that my lowest moment, locked in my own bedroom while strangers trashed my house, was also my turning point. Sometimes you have to fall completely before you can start climbing. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you do for yourself. The woman who was locked in that bedroom doesn't exist anymore. She was replaced by someone stronger, someone who knows her worth, someone who refuses to accept less than she deserves. It took 73 years for her to be born, but she was worth the wait. Every morning when I wake up in my quiet house, when I make my coffee in my clean kitchen, when I sit in my garden and watch the sun rise over Brooklyn, I think about that transformation, from victim to survivor to someone who thrives. From a woman who is afraid of being alone to a woman who cherishes her solitude. From someone who found her worth in being needed to someone who finds her worth in being herself. The journey wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made the right choice. There were moments of doubt when I almost called Marcus to apologize, to offer money, to go back to the old familiar patterns. There were times when the silence in my house felt more lonely than peaceful. But every time I wavered, I remembered that notebook. I remembered the calculations of my death, the timeline for putting me in a nursing home, the cold assessment of my value as an inheritance rather than a mother. I remembered the cruel laughter during that party, the sound of my belongings being destroyed while I sat trapped and helpless. Most importantly, I remembered how it felt to get up each morning with no purpose except to serve someone who saw me as disposable. I remembered the exhaustion of trying to earn love from people who had decided I wasn't worth loving. I remembered the humiliation of being grateful for the smallest scraps of acknowledgement from my own children. That version of myself deserved better. And so do you. If you recognize her in your own life, the path to freedom isn't complicated, but it's not easy either. It starts with a single word. No. No. You can't have money without asking. No. You can't treat me disrespectfully. No. You can't use my home as your personal hotel. No. You can't ignore my needs while demanding I meet yours. No. You can't claim to love me while treating me like garbage. Each no gets easier than the last, but only if you stick with it. Only if you refuse to negotiate your worth or apologize for having boundaries or sacrifice your dignity to keep someone else comfortable. Some people will hate your boundaries. They'll call you selfish, ungrateful, cruel. They'll try guilt, manipulation, anger, threats. They'll tell you that family should forgive everything, accept everything, enable everything. They'll make you feel like setting limits on abuse is somehow worse than the abuse itself. Don't listen to them. Listen to the voice inside you that knows you deserve better. Listen to the part of you that's tired of being taken for granted. Listen to the woman or man who spent decades giving and giving and giving and has nothing left to show for it but exhaustion and resentment. That voice is telling you the truth. You matter. Your feelings matter. Your dignity matters. Your peace of mind matters. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries because they want you to be happy and healthy. The people who fight your boundaries are the ones who benefited from your misery. You can't change how other people treat you, but you can change how much access they have to you. You can't force anyone to respect you, but you can refuse to spend time with people who don't. You can't make someone love you the way you deserve to be loved, but you can stop accepting love that feels like punishment. I'm not saying it's easy to rebuild your life at 73. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt to realize that some of the people you love most see you as nothing more than a renewable resource. I'm not saying you won't have moments of grief for the relationships you thought you had, for the family you thought you were part of. But I am saying it's possible. I am saying it's worth it. I am saying that you're never too old to start over, never too tired to stand up for yourself, never so damaged that you can't heal. Your story doesn't have to end with you as the victim of other people's selfishness. It can end with you as the hero of your own life, the person who finally said enough, who finally chose herself, who finally understood that she was worth protecting. The sunrise through my kitchen window looks the same as it did 40 years ago, but I see it differently now. It's not just the start of another day of serving everyone else's needs. It's the beginning of another day that belongs entirely to me. Another day to paint something beautiful, to read something interesting, to have lunch with a friend, to sit quietly in my garden and be grateful for the peace I fought so hard to achieve. This is what freedom looks like. Not dramatic or glamorous, just quiet and authentic and mine. But there's something else I want to share with you, something that happened just last month that reminded me why telling this story matters. I was at the farmer's market in Park Slope, selecting tomatoes for my garden salad, when I overheard a conversation at the next stall. An older woman, maybe 65, was on the phone speaking in hushed, desperate tones. "I know, honey. I know you need the money for the down payment, but I already gave you my retirement fund for the last business. I don't have anything left. What do you mean I'm being selfish? You're my daughter. No, please don't hang up." The woman's voice broke on those last words, and I saw her shoulders shake as she ended the call. She stood there for a moment, staring at her phone, and I recognized the look on her face. It was the same expression I used to see in my bathroom mirror every morning for 35 years. Defeated, hollow, wondering what she'd done wrong this time. I almost walked away. Part of me didn't want to get involved, didn't want to risk opening old wounds. But another part of me, the part that remembered being locked in my own bedroom, couldn't leave her standing there alone with that familiar despair. "Excuse me," I said gently, approaching her stall. I'm sorry. I couldn't help but overhear. Are you okay? She looked up at me with eyes that had cried too many tears over too many years. Oh, I'm fine. Just family drama. You know how it is. Unfortunately, I do, I said. More than I wish I did. Something in my tone must have resonated with her because she really looked at me then, studied my face. You've been there too, haven't you? The endless requests, the guilt trips, the feeling like you're never enough no matter what you give? I nodded. What's your name? Carol, she said. Carol Martinez. I'm Estelle Richardson. Carol, how long have you been your daughter's personal bank account? She laughed bitterly. 15 years? Maybe 20? It started when she graduated college with all that student debt. Then there was the wedding I paid for, the house down payment, the business loans when her husband's construction company failed. Now it's another business idea, some kind of online boutique that requires $25,000 in startup costs. And if you don't give her the money, she stops talking to me, keeps the grandchildren away, tells everyone in the family that I'm stingy and bitter and don't care about her success. Carol's voice cracked. She's already taken my retirement savings, my emergency fund, everything I worked 40 years to build. And now she wants me to take out a second mortgage on my house. My heart ached for her. Carol was living the nightmare I'd escaped, trapped in the same cycle of manipulation and financial abuse that had almost destroyed me. But unlike me, she was still fighting to save a relationship that was already dead. Carol, I said carefully, what do you think would happen if one day you just said no? I'd lose her, she said immediately. She's all the family I have left since my husband died. My son lives in Seattle and barely calls. If I alienate Rebecca too? But are you really not already lost to her? When was the last time she called just to see how you were doing? When was the last time she showed interest in your life without needing something from you? Carol stared at me, and I could see the uncomfortable recognition in her eyes. She's been under a lot of stress with the business planning. That's not what I asked, I said gently but firmly. When was the last time your daughter treated you like a person instead of a resource? The tears came then, quiet and heartbroken. I can't even remember, she whispered. I handed her a tissue from my purse. Carol, can I tell you something? 3 years ago, my son threw a party in my house and locked me in my bedroom so I wouldn't interfere. 50 strangers destroyed my home while I sat trapped like a prisoner. The next morning, while I was cleaning up broken glass and wine stains, he stood there making excuses and expecting me to forgive him like I always did. Her eyes widened. What did you do? I kicked him out, changed the locks, cut off his money, and you know what happened? The first few months were terrible. I questioned myself constantly, wondered if I was being cruel, if I was destroying our family. But then something amazing happened. I started sleeping through the night. I started eating meals without criticism. I started living for myself instead of just surviving for everyone else. But didn't you miss him? Weren't you lonely? I was already lonely, I said. I'd been lonely for years while living with someone who treated me like garbage. The difference was, now I was alone by choice instead of lonely by abuse. And eventually, I wasn't even alone anymore. I made real friends. People who valued me for who I was instead of what I could give them. Carol looked around the farmer's market, at the families shopping together, the couples holding hands, the friends laughing over coffee. What about your son now? Do you ever see him? We have coffee once a month, I said. Not because I need him to, not because he wants something from me, but because we both choose to. He went to therapy, did the work to understand how he'd been treating me. Now we have a real relationship instead of a transaction. But that only happened after I stopped enabling his behavior. I don't know if I could do that, Carol said. She's volatile when she doesn't get what she wants. She knows exactly what to say to hurt me. Of course she does. She learned those words from watching what worked on you for 20 years. Carol, your daughter isn't going to change as long as her current behavior gets her what she wants. Why would she treat you better when treating you badly is more profitable? We stood there in the sunshine, two women who'd given too much for too long, surrounded by the simple abundance of the farmer's market. Finally, Carol asked, "How did you find the courage to say no?" I ran out of ways to say yes, I said honestly. I hit rock bottom and realized that the choice wasn't between having a relationship with my son or not having one. The choice was between having a relationship where I was respected or having one where I was exploited. Once I understood that, the decision became easier. I reached into my purse and pulled out Dr. Williams's business card, one of several she'd given me to share with other parents in similar situations. Carol, there's a support group for people in your situation, parents who've been financially and emotionally abused by their adult children. You're not alone in this, and you don't have to figure it out by yourself. She took the card with shaking hands. Would you mind if I called you sometime? I don't have anyone I can talk to about this. Everyone thinks I should be grateful to have children who still need me. Needing you and using you are two very different things, I said, and gave her my phone number. Call me anytime. 2 weeks later, Carol did call. She'd gone to her first support group meeting and was shocked to discover how many other parents were living versions of her story. More importantly, she'd started setting small boundaries with Rebecca. I told her I needed to see a business plan before discussing any investment, Carol said. She screamed at me for an hour, called me controlling and manipulative, but I didn't give in. I just kept repeating that I needed to see the plan. How did that feel? I asked. Terrifying, she admitted, but also powerful? Like maybe I have more control over this situation than I thought. That conversation reminded me of something crucial. Healing isn't just personal. When we break free from cycles of abuse and exploitation, we create space for other people to do the same. Our courage gives others permission to be courageous. Our boundaries show other people that boundaries are possible. 6 months later, Carol called with an update that brought tears to my eyes. Rebecca had finally provided a business plan that was so poorly thought out, so obviously doomed to failure, that even Carol could see it was just another scheme to extract money from her mother. I said no, Carol told me, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. She threatened to cut me off from the grandchildren, said I was destroying her dreams, tried every manipulation tactic in the book. But I held firm. And you know what happened? What? Nothing catastrophic. She was furious for about a month. Then she called asking for help with something smaller. When I said no to that too, she actually started problem-solving on her own. For the first time in 20 years, my daughter is taking responsibility for her own life because I stopped taking responsibility for it. How do you feel? I asked. Free, she said simply. I feel free. Carol's story, and the dozens of others I've encountered through Dr. Williams's support group over the past 3 years, have taught me that my experience with Marcus wasn't an aberration. It's an epidemic. Adult children who view their parents as renewable resources, who manipulate love and guilt to extract money and support they haven't earned, who believe that being family gives them the right to treat their parents as less than human. But every person who finds the courage to say enough breaks the cycle a little bit more. Every parent who chooses dignity over dysfunction creates space for healing. Every boundary drawn in love rather than fear shows other people that it's possible to love someone without letting them destroy you. This is why I'm sharing my story with you today. Not because I want pity or praise, but because somewhere out there is another Estelle, another Carol, another parent who thinks they're alone in their struggle. Someone who believes that enduring abuse is the same as showing love. Someone who's forgotten that they matter too. If that person is you, I need you to hear this. Your worth is not determined by how much you can give. Your value as a parent isn't measured by your willingness to be exploited. Your love isn't proven by your tolerance for mistreatment. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect. You deserve to have your needs considered. You deserve to live the life you've worked so hard to build instead of watching someone else spend it away. You deserve peace in your own home, safety in your own heart, and dignity in all your relationships. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries. The people who fight against your self-protection are the ones who benefited from your self-destruction. It's really that simple, even when it doesn't feel simple. Last week, on my 75th birthday, I did something that would have been impossible 3 years ago. I threw myself a party. Not a big elaborate affair, just an afternoon gathering in my garden with Joan, Maria, Carol, and a few other friends from my art class and book club. We ate cake and laughed and celebrated not just my birthday, but the life I'd built from the ashes of the one I'd lost. Marcus came by that morning with flowers and a card. Not because I'd asked him to, not because he wanted something, but because he genuinely wanted to wish his mother well on her birthday. We had coffee in my clean kitchen, talked about his job and his continued therapy, and for the first time in 35 years, I felt like I was having a conversation with someone who saw me as a complete person rather than a convenient resource. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said as he was leaving, "for standing up to me when I needed it most. I know it wasn't easy." "No," I said. "It wasn't. But it was necessary. I think I'm finally becoming the son you deserved all along," he said. "You're becoming the man you deserve to be," I corrected. "That's what matters most." After he left, I sat in my garden surrounded by the evidence of my new life. The tomatoes I'd planted were heavy on the vine. My latest watercolor painting was drying on the easel Joan had given me for my birthday. My phone buzzed with messages from Mara in Los Angeles, from friends I'd made in my art class, from Carol checking in to see how my day was going. This is what recovery looks like. Not dramatic or cinematic, just quiet and real and mine. A life built on choices rather than obligations, on respect rather than guilt, on love that lifts up rather than tears down. 3 years ago, I was locked in my own bedroom while strangers destroyed my home. Today, I'm sitting in my own garden, surrounded by people who value me, planning a trip to see the leaves change in Vermont, excited about the portrait class I'm starting next month at the museum. The transformation wasn't magic. It was work. Hard work, uncomfortable work, heartbreaking work. It meant facing the truth about relationships I'd spent decades romanticizing. It meant accepting that some people, even people we love deeply, are not safe to be vulnerable with. It meant learning the difference between being loving and being a victim. But if a 73-year-old woman who'd spent 35 years enabling abuse could find the strength to rebuild her entire life, then maybe there's hope for anyone trapped in similar cycles. Maybe there's hope for you, if this story resonated with something in your heart. The sunrise through my kitchen window is the same every morning, but I see it differently now. It's not the beginning of another day of enduring other people's dysfunction. It's the start of another day that belongs entirely to me. Another day to create something beautiful, to nurture relationships that nurture me back, to live with the quiet satisfaction of someone who finally learned to protect what matters most. And what matters most isn't making everyone else comfortable with your sacrifice. It's making sure you're still here, still whole, still capable of joy when the people who've been taking from you finally learn to give back or move along. This is my story. A story of discovering that it's never too late to start over, never too old to stand up for yourself, never so loving that you have to accept being unloved in return. Have you lived something like this? Have you ever loved someone who made you feel like loving them was a job you could never do well enough? Have you ever wondered if you matter to the people who matter most to you? Your voice matters. Your experience matters. Your journey toward dignity and self-respect matters. You're not alone in this struggle, and you don't have to accept being treated as less than you are. If my story touched something in your heart, if it reminded you that you deserve better, if it gave you even a moment of hope that change is possible, please share it. Together, we can build a community of people who refuse to be anyone's doormat, who choose respect over approval, who understand that the most radical thing you can do sometimes is simply to value yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me not as a victim but as a survivor. Thank you for believing that it's never too late to start living the life you deserve. The woman I was 3 years ago would never have imagined I'd be sitting here today, peaceful and purpose-driven and genuinely happy, but she's the one who made this moment possible. By finally saying enough, by finally choosing herself, by finally understanding that love without respect isn't love at all, it's just beautiful wrapping paper around an empty box. Don't let anyone convince you that your empty box is full. Don't let anyone tell you that pretty wrapping paper is the same as a meaningful gift. You deserve relationships that fill you up instead of bleeding you dry. You deserve love that feels like love, not like a job you're failing at. Your story doesn't have to end the way mine began. It can end with you as the hero of your own life, the person who finally said enough, who finally chose dignity, who finally understood that you were worth protecting all along. The choice is yours. The power is yours. The life you deserve is waiting for you to claim it.